as you will see, because there are topics like Pratyayaha, Ardhadhatuka, and so on and so forth. Since every adhikara has a particular topic. However, the topics arranged here, they do not reflect the sequence or arrangement which student of grammar would have generally expected from a book on grammar of Sanskrit, such as say Witness book on Sanskrit grammar or any other book, modern book, digest for that matter. Thus, let us take these adhikaras, some of these adhikaras. For instance, the first adhikara, in the very first adhikara, we meet the term Atmanipadam. And this term denotes verbal endings of, I don't know whether we can translate Atmanipada as middle voice, but I have found this translation in some English books. So temporarily, I translate it as middle voice. So here, the verbal endings of the middle voice are discussed or treated. This adhikara is both preceded and followed by a section, which, or you can say sections, which describe mainly Saujnas and Paribhashas. And these sections are not headed by adhikaras. This is the situation in the first chapter. So the first chapter begins with Saujnas and Paribhashas. The first chapter ends with Saujnas and Paribhashas. And in between, you have this adhikara headed by the word Atmanepadi. There are in fact many groups of rules in between these adhikaras, which are devoid of adhikar. So everywhere you will not find a particular section headed by a particular adhikara term. And the reason is obvious. Adhikara word is a word which is a common denominator of a certain group of sutras. It is a part of the sutra text shared by a group. And this word belonging to the sutra text, which is shared by a certain group, is picked up and put as the head of the group for its continuation, that is anuvritti. So the basic purpose of adhikara is anuvritti in a larger group of sutras. Generally, anuvritti is there throughout Ashtadhyayi, but generally it is continued in a shorter group. But when it is continued in a larger group, and when we have a heading like this, we call it adhikara. So adhikara is nothing different from anuvritti. And even among these adhikaras, some of them are not adhikaras in the technical sense of the term. They are words actually belonging to some Vidhi sutras. A large the groups of the sutras which do not share a common denominator, they have no adhikaras, and therefore in Saudhnya Paribhasha Prakarana we don't say any adhikara, because all these rules, Saudhnya rules and Paribhasha rules, their text, they don't share any word in common which can be picked up and put as the heading. The adhikaras thus serve, apart from enabling Panini to achieve economy, the purpose of section headings, as I said. And their arrangement and sequence seeks for the arrangement of contents of Panini's grammar. A glance at the arrangement of these major adhikaras shows that it is not possible to account for the like. So the first thing we meet with this picture of the list of adhikaras is that we are not able to find any consistency. And on the contrary, what we find is that there is some kind of a disturbance, because we have a certain sequence of topics in our mind, and we don't find that particular sequence here in this list or in this sequence of adhikaras. As we saw, this adhikaras like Atmanepadam, they disturb the continuity of certain sections. And similarly, there is another section headed by the adhikara samasa, the very next section you can find in the list. And this section also disturbs the continuity of two sections, both, I mean, these two sections headed by Karake and Anavihite, which both deal with the topic of nominal declension. So in between the topic of the rules dealing with nominal declension, we have a group of rules dealing with samasas. A few more discrepancies in this arrangement of contents can be pointed out. However, it is not our concern at present, and nor have I so far come across any satisfactory explanation of these or any one of these discrepancies. Maybe perhaps a deeper thought could reveal some consistency among them. What was there in Panini's mind needs to be searched. His mind needs to be actually pierced through so that we can find some explanation. But if anyone from the audience is aware of any such explanation or can offer any, he or she is most welcome. What I have come across so far is the argument or the solution rather offered by some Paninian scholars is that after formulating the main component of his grammar, Panini has arranged the miscellaneous sections in the earlier part before third chapter and in the subsequent part after the fifth chapter. So 3 to 5 is the main component, and after formulating that component, whatever little sections he had composed, he just put them here and there. Of course, he must have thought about the proper sequence, which we actually failed to understand. Anyway, what is to be noted for our present purpose here is that these adhikaras tell us that Panini has extensively dealt with major topics of grammar, such as compound formation, nominal declension, verbal conjugation, primary and secondary derivatives. And note, I have given you also the extent of these adhikaras, and that will make my point clear that Panini has extensively dealt with them. Panini even deals with the compound accent in a greater detail. You will find so many adhikaras are devoted to the accent, like say Adihi Udattaha, Antaha Udattaha, Uttarapada Adihi Udattaha, Uttarapada Antaha Udattaha, and so on. And even at the end of the, towards the end of the 8th chapter also, we have a small section dealing with accents, which I have not put here because it is not headed by any adhikara. Again, you will find adhikara dhatoho running over about say 142 sutras, and the adhikara tadhita running over 281 sutras. And Panini has also extensively dealt with the very popular topic of sandhi in 2 different sections, because there are 2 adhikara, or rather 3 adhikaras, Samhitayam, you will see in this chart. Further, the adhikaras Samhitayam, Angasya, Padasya, and Vakyasya. You can find them here. Samhitayam 6.1, 71. Then after say 7-8 adhikaras, there is this adhikara Angasya 641. Then we have the Adhikara Padasya 8.1.16. And finally, we have the Adhikara Vakyasya 8.2.82. So this is also the sequence of these Adhikaras. So we have these Adhikaras like Samhitayam, Angasya, Padasya and Vakyasya. So this particular sequence and this terminology, they have led some Paninian scholars to think that Panini, while describing the formation of words, has maintained different levels of derivations, such as Varna Vidhi, Anga Vidhi. So Varna Vidhi means operations dealing with phonemes, that is Samhita. And all such rules are put under the Adhikara Samhitayam. Actually, Varna Vidhi means Sandhi. Then we have Anga Vidhi, which means operations dealing with stems. We have Pada Vidhi, operations on the level of a word. And finally, we have Vakyasya, operations on the level of a sentence. This sequence of Adhikaras further speaks of the sequence of levels and suggests that Panini has maintained the hierarchy in word building from less complex or simple to the more complex units. So this hierarchy also is regarded as one of the special features of Panini's descriptive technique. When we study in detail Panini's grammar, these points will be more clear. Unfortunately, this being an introductory course, I cannot give more details. And last but most important observation to be noted, after glancing through these adhikaras, is the major division of the whole text of the Ashtadhyayi into two sections. First, comprising first 7 adhyayas and the first pada of the 8th chapter, and the second comprising the last 3 padas of the 8th adhyaya. In fact, I should have shown it on in a separate table, but I haven't done it. And here also I have put this last Adhikara Purvatra Siddham as an afterthought. You might have noticed it, but it's a very, very important Adhikara. Purvatra Siddham is an Adhikara which divides the whole text of the Ashtadhyayi into 2 sections. And it's a very, very important aspect of the arrangement of the content in Panini's Ashtadhyayi. At this juncture, we are not going into the details of what is Asiddha and what is Siddha. We may have an occasion later on to deal with that. This Adhikara Purvatra Siddham, which means that the rules subsequent to this Adhikara are Asiddha, as if not accomplished, not in existence, for the rules in the previous section. So in other words, Panini has put in the last 3 padas, all the 3 padas subsequent to this Adhikara or following this Adhikara Purvatra Siddham. What he has put in these 3 padas is all such rules which do not operate till the operations stated in the earlier part, that is first 7 adhyayas and the first part of the 8th chapter, they are accomplished. So there is some kind of a sequence order. So all the rules in the Sapada Saptadhyayi, as it is traditionally called, the first 7 chapters and the first pada of the 8th is called Sapada Saptadhyayi, and the last 3 padas of the 8th chapter, together they are called Tripadi. So unless and until all the rules in the Sapada Saptadhyayi are applied, not a single rule in Tripadi has any scope to apply. It is eligible for application only after the operations prescribed by the rules in the Sapada Saptadhyayi have already taken place. So some kind of a sequence. In other words, we can say that for any rule in the Sapada Saptadhyayi, Any rule in the Tripadi does not exist at all. So the last rule in the Sapada Saptadhyayi thinks that Ashtadhyayi has ended with it. So also in case of the rules in the Tripadi, every rule in the Tripadi thinks that the Ashtadhyayi has come to an end with it. Ashtadhyayi is not continuing after that rule. So this is Asiddhatva within Tripadi, and what I had discussed earlier is Asiddhatva between Sapada Saptadhyayi and Tripadi. So this kind of division has a bearing on the descriptive technique adopted by Panini, which will be discussed later. However, it forms an important aspect of the arrangement of the contents and therefore deserves a special mention here. I may discuss the implications of this division in one of our later sessions. However, I must mention in this context that the concept of asiddha and the division of Panini's grammar on the basis of siddha and asiddha. Well, the term siddha has never been used by Panini, but the very term asiddha implies its corresponding term siddha. Pratidvandvi shabdaha. In Sanskrit, they call it pratidvandvi shabdaha. So if there is something asiddha, there must be something siddha. So whole Sapada Saptadhyayi we can describe as a siddha kanda, in contrast to the Tripadi, which is described as asiddha kanda. On the basis of siddha and asiddha, this division, it has tempted some scholars to compare Panini's system with a computer program. And it is highly appreciated as one of the ingenious devices employed by Panini. When we see the details, when we study some rules in both these sections, perhaps we will get some better idea about it. So, by way of summing up, we can say that though the arrangement of contents in the Ashtadhyayi as reflected in the arrangement of adhikaras, as we have seen in this table, evinces thematic foundation, and it is very clearly seen because Panini has grouped all the rules dealing with samasa under the adhikara samasaha. He has grouped all the suffixes under the adhikara pratyayaha. Then all the rules describing derivation of verbal forms is they are included, or they are governed by the adhikara dhatoho. The dhitaha also is a separate adhikara governing all the secondary derivatives and so on and so. So some kind of a thematic foundation, thematic basis is there to some extent, we can say. So actually the arrangement of the adhikaras appears to be more governed by the dictates of anuvritti. And if we study anuvritti more closely, this point is certainly going to be more clear to us. And now we take up the next topic, that is methodology devised by Panini in describing Sanskrit language. And we have already noted that Panini's methodology consists of two broad divisions, or maybe we can call these two broad processes: analysis and synthesis. For more details, we'll have to take a glimpse into his workshop. And may I request now Talat to show this second picture?
Yes, madam. Yes, please wait. Yeah, yes.
Thank you. In fact, I was tempted to display a picture of Panini's workshop by actually drawing a picture of a workshop, but then I tried and I found that my drawing is so bad that you will start laughing at it. So I canceled the idea of showing the workshop. and I decided to just describe it in words.
Yes, madam, please see.
Yeah. Okay. So a casual look at the workshop shows, and that you will not see on the in this paper. I am telling you that when I cast a glance at Panini's workshop, what I see is that the workshop is divided into two sections. So there are two rooms in this workshop, and in one room uh, there is a raw material in the form of linguistic utterances, uncountable, collected by Panini according to one Chinese account for 12 years by going from place to place. So all these linguistic data collected by Panini has been systematically arranged in one part of the workshop, while in the other part, Panini has kept his tools. And today we are going to see only one of them, which is very prominent. And there are a few others also, but that we will deal with little later. So the prominent among these tools is the tool called abstraction, employed for the purpose of analysis. Panini must have chosen this tool to suit his aim. And now we come to Panini's aim in composing his grammar. So what is his aim? What does he want to achieve? What, according to him, is going to be the end result of his endeavor? And this question has been addressed by many scholars, and different answers also they have given. But for us, for the time being, we certainly can have one single answer. And after a careful study of his grammar, some eminent Paninian scholars have expressed the view that Panini aims at formalization of Sanskrit grammar. In other words, he proposes to present his grammar as a formal system. So it has been already clear, and it is now again clear, and it will be more and more clear as we go on, that Panini's grammar is never ever meant to teach Sanskrit grammar to beginners or even to students. You can say it's not a pathashala text, the text to be taught in a pathashala to study or to learn the grammar of Sanskrit language. It has a very different purpose to serve. And one of them is to present Sanskrit language or even the grammar of the Sanskrit language as a formal system. So that even language also has been given the status of a system by Panini. Otherwise, it consists of a lot of chaos. So Panini has done away with this chaos and presented it before us as a system. And at the same time, he has presented grammar also as a formal system. So what is a formal system and what is formalism? I have given one definition of formalism on the paper. So Oxford Dictionary says formalism is the practice or doctrine of strict adherence to or a sole consideration of prescribed or external form. So formalism consists in paying more attention, or rather paying full concentration, full attention on the form rather than content. In simple words, for our present purpose, of course, we can say that formalism is a view that concerns itself with the form rather than the content. And a formal system is described as a well-defined system of abstract thought based on the model of mathematics. So any formal system, for that matter, goes closer to mathematics Because as mathematics is an abstract system, a formal system dealing with any system of knowledge, any school of knowledge, is abstract in its character. And to some extent, we have already seen in Panini's grammar this kind of abstraction or its abstract character. It must be remembered, and we have noted it earlier, that Panini was not the first person to use this device of abstraction. It was very much there in pre-Paninian grammatical literature. It was quite extensively used. It was the need of the time also. His predecessors like, say, Yask and the composers of Shiksha, Pratishakya, treatises, and other linguists, even his own predecessors in Sanskrit grammar, whom he mentions, they had already practiced this abstraction, method of abstraction, as it was a part of the mnemotechnical system adopted by all earlier composers of scientific treatises. Thus, the classification of speech units into 4 parts of speech and the notion of word building from stem and suffix, we have already seen all these points. It is already mentioned by Yaska. So all these things were handed down to Panini. Abstraction was not something which was devised or invented by Panini. And yet we can say that Panini used this device or this tool of abstraction to its optimum. And he developed, as some scholars described in their words, linguistic atomism. Now, as you see in the picture, Yask has given 4-fold division of speech units: Naman, Akshata, Upasarga, and Nipat. So Panini's process of abstraction begins with what he has received from his predecessors. The first thing he does is to further abstract these categories, further abstract these parts of speech, 4 parts of speech into 2. So he retains only 2, Naman and Akshata, and he includes Upasargas and Nipata in the Naman. Of course, it is very easy to say, but the task was not that easy. It must have been very difficult for Panini to regard categories like, say, Avyaya, Nipata, and Upasarga as nouns, which appears very strange even for us. But yes, he did include them. And you also might be aware that all the Avyayas, including their subvarieties, and there is some of their subvarieties, they include also some Taddhita formations. They take up case endings. So Avyaya, the very term Avyaya, its significance is totally defeated in Panini's grammar. Avyayam atra savyayam, even Avyaya is declined in Panini's grammar. So this is how he made some major changes in the abstracted categories which he received from his predecessors. Then we can imagine how he must have worked in the workshop. So let us turn again to the section or the room where he has arranged the linguistic data. We can guess that the whole linguistic data which he collected must have been very systematically arranged, classified into different sentence patterns. After he classified those sentences into different sentence patterns, he picked up each individual type, analyzed carefully the meanings understood from a sentence. And at the next stage, he correlated those meanings with the linguistic elements resulting from the splitting of the speech units. So I have given here a very, very simple example, a very simple sentence known to all of you, very easy to understand. Vrukshat phalam patati. A fruit falls from the tree. So what are the components of meaning which are or which belong to each one of these units, linguistic units? First of all, we have to split each one of these linguistic units into their basic components like stem and suffix. So vruksha, at, pala, pat, and then ati. Well, there can be and the separate and so on and so forth. So this is, a kind of a working division I have made. I have not gone into the details, but just I want to drive my point home so that it will be clear to you that Panini has actually analyzed several meanings from these different word components. So vruksha conveys how many meanings? First of all, it conveys the lexical meaning, that is a tree, then masculine, singular, and present. Present is very much a part of the meaning of vruksha, because unless the vruksha is present, we cannot say patati, because patati is a present word form. It's a present tense form. Then the ending at conveys, first of all, fixed point. Fixed point is the meaning of apadana karaka. Dhruvam apaye apadanam. Those who have studied some part of Ashtadhyayi will understand this. So this suffix conveys this meaning, fixed point, and in addition to that, it also conveys singularity or singular. Then phala conveys its own lexical meaning, fruit. It conveys neuter, singular, and also present. The suffix added, the ending added to phala, conveys three meanings: neuter, singular, and agent, the karaka. Pata, the basic root, conveys its lexical meaning. Beyond that, it doesn't convey anything, as far as my knowledge goes. And then the suffix or the complex of suffixes, two suffixes are there, O and T, conveys present, agent, and singular. And there may be a few more meanings. We may add them if we go look closer into Panini's sutras. But this is just a cursory look at the sutras, and these are the meanings which we find are intended by Panini. So minimum 17 meanings are understood from the sentence. So this is an example of Panini's abstraction. Actually, this is what I want to point out. So his endeavor has throughout been to establish one-to-one correspondence between the constituents of the phonetic content and the semantic content of a particular speech unit. And therefore, he has strived very hard to see that not a single phoneme in a speech unit is left without meaning. This is a very significant Paninian contribution, which takes him to the level of linguistic atomism. In other words, you cannot split any word beyond what Panini has done. And he has seen to it that every single phoneme in a particular speech unit has some connection with the meaning. Of course, I will later offer a couple of examples to show how he does not allow a single phoneme to remain idle. Of course, there are a few exceptions, like, what we call in modern linguistic terminology, empty morphs. They do exist there. But apart from those exceptions, as far as possible, Panini has tried to ascribe meaning to each and every, I should say, phoneme in a linguistic unit. To carry forward the employment of abstraction, Panini has compared all speech units sharing the same complex of abstract meanings, of course, divide of their lexical meanings. For instance, he collected all the ablative singular formations such as Bruksha, Radnyaha, Harehe, etc. And after laboring hard, by splitting and combining speech units of the same class, he devised a set of abstract case endings like Su Auja Samaushas, and I have given all these abstract case endings uh, on the paper. And perhaps you will think that, well, all these things we know, and what is she doing with all this? This is all just superficial, and it doesn't give add to our knowledge. So these 21 abstract case endings, they hold true for all the nominal stems. And again, the number is infinite because Panini hasn't given a complete list of nominal stems. He has only given the list in terms of some Ganapathas. So in the same manner, but before going to that same manner, in the last line, I have mentioned that the dative singular suffix "nye" caters to all the dative singular forms, like say Ramaya, Radnye, Sadhave, Madhune, Nadyai, Malayai. So maybe it is singular, maybe it is neuter, masculine, feminine, whatever. Maybe it ends in a vowel, ends in a consonant, and so on. So for all, the same set of case endings works. And this must again have been a very hard task for Panini. But this is the result of the use of his tool of abstraction. He invented a set of 18 verbal endings in the same manner as he did with his nominal endings. He also classified the tenses and moods expressed by the verbal forms into a set of 10 abstract suffixes, sharing the phoneme L, and therefore they are called lakaras. So on the one hand, we have 10 lakaras or 10 hypothetical sets of verbal endings dealing with different tenses and moods. And on the other hand, we also have 10 different groups of verbal roots based on the Dhatu Patha or included in the Dhatu Patha. This picture, and I think I refer to picture number 3. So will you show the third picture?
Yes. Yes. Yes, madam. Please check it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this picture, on the one hand, on the one side, you see the list of the 10 root classes, beginning with bodies, that is first, second, third, etc., up to the 10th class Shuradi. So these 10 lists, and on the other side, we have the 10 lakaras, which are meant to express 10 types of tenses and moods. And in between, we have a set of verbal endings. Tiptasji, Siptastha, Mipvasmasta, Atamja, Thas, Atamdvam, It, Vahim, Mahim. So there are 18. They are further divided into groups of 3, Prathama, Madhyama, Uttama. So first person, middle person, you can say, or second person and third person. And also,
I think you're still showing the SOPA, the thing going, you're not showing. Just, I think, is it the right slide? Because this is the same paper.
I don't see the slide actually.
Oh, they're still showing the same old one.
You are right. You are right. This is not the
No, this
slide.
is not the same. This is not the same. This is the third one.
No,
No, it is different.
Same.
No.
She's talking about the thing now, I think.
Exactly.
Next one.
1 minute.
Please show the
Talat
next
madam.
one. I'm sorry, I also did not notice it.
Please, madam, check it. Hello? Yeah, please check it.
No.
Actually, instead of 3 pages, the second page is clicked thrice. So there is page 3 in the left top. Please just
I
look after it.
saved the second page twice because I thought the first page is not very clear.
Hence, that could be the problem. Not to worry. Not to worry.
Choose the clearer one.
Now you need fourth one, madam, or third one?
Actually, the last one, Talat.
Last one. Okay, fine. Okay, wait.
It's going to be the last.
Yeah. Okay. 1 minute.
And there is no more.
Yeah, the last one. Okay, fine. Yeah.
I think you have already sent it to participants by email, isn't it?
Yes, madam. We have already sent them.
Okay.
Yeah, now you can see, please. You check. This is the last one slide. Yeah.
It is visible, perfectly visible.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, now the picture is before you, and what I told you, you must have seen it in the picture. On the one hand, we have these 10 classes of roots. On the other hand, we have these 10 classes of lakaras. And in between, we have these verbal endings. And what we find, what the picture tries to actually suggest is that this set of 18 endings caters to both. On the one hand, it caters to all the 10 root classes, and on the other hand, to all the 10 lakaras. And further, Panini in one of his rules states 3 meanings of these lakaras: kartru, karman, and bhava. And the rule, I'm sorry I did not put the rule here, but the rule is lakh karmanicha bhavecha akarmapebhya. So all these 10 lakaras, they are added to a verbal root in one of these 3 meanings. It is either kartru or karman or bhav, that is state. And again, the point which I forgot to mention, but which is very clear on the paper, is that these verbal endings, 18 verbal endings, are divided into 2 groups, Parasmai Pada and Atmane Pada. And again, as far as Panini's grammar is concerned, this division is also based on some meaning, though this meaning did not exist later on in post-Paninian Sanskrit language. Even for Panini, it did not exist to some extent. Anyway, that detail we will see later on. So it is clear from this picture how the same set of 18 suffixes caters to both these sets. And as I said, each one of these lakaras conveys 3 meanings. And in addition, they also convey the notion, these endings, they convey the notion of number and person. So consider the extent of information put in by Panini in each one of these suffixes. Just take up the ending tip, which conveys third person, singular, and any tense and any mood potential. All these facts put together, they lead us to an amazing world of words, which is open to us by Panini. These 18 archetypal verbal endings that theoretically derive as many as 540 verbal forms from any single root. 540 verbal forms from any single root can be derived with the help of these 18 verbal endings. And the calculation is not very difficult. 18 endings into 10 lakaras into 3 meanings. So, and it comes to 540. So we can say that with these verbal endings, Panini has made a provision for deriving 500 potential sentences. Panini's grammar described. What is grammar? The answer can be his grammar describes 540 sentence types in Sanskrit language, because all these are again based on sentence patterns already classified by Panini from his linguistic data. And if we multiply this number 540 by the number of roots in the Dhatu Pata, say 2000, then we can say that Panini has provided for the derivation of, according to my calculation, I am not good at mathematics, but perhaps I might be correct, 10,80,000 sentences in Sanskrit. So 540 multiplied by 2000 roots, that results in 10 lakh 80,000. So that maybe, in other words, we can say 108 million sentences in Sanskrit language. So look at the extent to which these
1.8 million. Sorry for
18 verbal endings are used. So this is the magic of Panini machine, exhibiting Panini's supreme skill in handling the tool of abstraction. So this is all, the result of Panini's scheme of abstraction. With the help of just 18 suffixes, he has been able to hand over to the students, of course, along with the Dhatu Pata, 108 million sentence types, potential we should say. Doesn't mean that they all existed in the language, but theoretically, yes, they did. When I talked about Vrukshat Kalam Patati, I was quite aware that I have chosen a very, very simple illustration. But Panini has handled many more complex sentence types involving additional meanings in terms of emotions, feelings, and attitudes like love, anger, hatred, appreciation, respect, etc. So a sentence in any language is not always a mere statement of facts. It is accompanied by many other components like emotions, attitudes, question, answer, and so on. So Panini has already classified even these aspects of language. So a scholar's, I remember one scholar has said about Panini's statement of Sanskrit language that Panini deals with language in all its totality as a part of human behavior. And this is very much true when we look at those rules which deal with emotions and feelings. And there are quite many. If you study Panini's sutras, you will come across so many of them. Sometimes he found that the meaning of a root changes if it is preceded by a certain upasarga. He carefully studied such forms and he noticed that a corresponding change in the form also takes place. So there is again some kind of correspondence between the meaning and the form, which an intelligent grammarian like Panini could notice. It's not very easy for an ordinary person to sense this, although it may appear for you that this is very, very simple and we could have done it. But take up an example like, say, the very second example which I have put on this paper is about the rule sam paribhyam karotau bhushane. This rule teaches that when the root kru is preceded by the upasarga sam, it denotes a different meaning. And that meaning is to beautify, to adorn, to decorate, to finish, to give polish. And the form of, rather the krut form of that word is very well known. Samskruta comes from samkru. And Panini also noticed this a certain corresponding change in the form in the usage. So it is samskaroti and not sankaroti. Samkru would ordinarily give us the form sankaroti, but when it conveys the meaning to beautify, it is samskaroti. Through his power of abstraction, Panini prescribed in the rule samparipyam karoto bhushane, which is in front of you, the augment sut. Generally, the augments are empty marks. They are not invested with any